August 3rd, 2016. The evening air hung thick and humid over Riverside, South Carolina, a small textile town where everybody knew everybody's business, or at least they thought they did. Tommy Braley, a 28-year-old mechanic with calloused hands and an easy smile, left his shift at Anderson's Auto Repair at 6:47 p.m. His time card showed it. Security footage caught him walking to his silver 2007 BMW 328i in the parking lot. He waved to a coworker, climbed into his car, and drove away into the golden light of a summer evening. He was never seen again. No body, no car, no trace. For 7 years, Tommy Braley existed in that terrible liminal space between missing and dead, present and gone. His disappearance tore through Riverside like a jagged wound, leaving his family desperate for answers and a community haunted by the question, how does someone just vanish? Before we unravel this mystery that would take detectives down dark roads through layers of deception, and finally to a shocking discovery in the most unlikely place, take a moment to subscribe and hit the like button. These stories matter. These victims matter. And your support ensures they're never forgotten. Tommy Braley's case would expose secrets buried in plain sight, reveal how well people can lie even to those closest to them, and prove that sometimes the person you think you know best is the one you don't know at all. This is the story of a man who disappeared, a search that never stopped, and the truth that was hidden 7 feet beneath the ground where it should never have been. Riverside, South Carolina, wasn't the kind of place that made headlines. Population 6,400, nestled in the upstate region where old textile warehouses stood like monuments to a different era. The mills that once employed half the town had mostly shuttered, replaced by small businesses, chain restaurants on a highway, and the kind of quiet desperation that settled over former industrial towns across the South. Tommy Braley had lived in Riverside his entire life. Born in 1988 to Jean and Patricia Braley, he was the middle child between 2 sisters, Kelsey and Amanda. The Braleys weren't wealthy, but they were stable. Jean worked at the Duke Energy plant. Patricia was a nurse at Riverside Regional Medical Center. They lived in a modest ranch house on Oakwood Drive, attended First Baptist Church on Sundays, and were known as good, solid people. Tommy had been a decent student, better with his hands than with books. In high school, he'd taken every shop class available, spending his afternoons in the automotive lab while other kids played sports or hung out at the Sonic. He could diagnose an engine problem by sound alone, a talent that earned him respect and steady work. After graduation, he'd gone straight to work at Anderson's Auto Repair, where owner Dale Anderson treated him like a son. Tommy was the kind of guy who'd give you the shirt off his back, Dale would later tell investigators. Customer would come in worried about affording a repair. Tommy would sometimes fix it after hours for free, just using spare parts. He couldn't stand to see people struggling. At 28, Tommy was exactly where he wanted to be. He had a job he loved, a close group of friends he'd known since elementary school, and had recently started saving for a down payment on a house. He'd been dating a woman named Melissa Hooper on and off for 2 years. The relationship was complicated. They'd broken up 3 times already, but Tommy's friend said he was crazy about her. Melissa, 26, worked as a bartender at Rusty's Roadhouse, a local dive bar where the regulars knew her by name. She was attractive in a hard-edged way, with bottle blonde hair and the kind of wary eyes that suggested life hadn't always been easy. She'd moved to Riverside from Columbia 5 years earlier, running from a bad relationship. She told people. She lived in a small apartment on the south side of town, the kind of place where the rent was cheap and neighbors minded their own business. To Tommy's family, Melissa was trouble. Patricia Braley had never warmed to her, sensing something she couldn't quite name. She was always so secretive, Patricia later recalled. Tommy would talk about going to her place, but she never wanted to come to family dinners. Never wanted to meet us halfway on anything. And she had this way of making him feel like he wasn't good enough, like he always had to prove himself. But Tommy was in love, or at least he thought he was. And when you're 28 and in love in a small town with limited options, you make excuses for the red flags. The silver BMW he drove was his pride and joy. He'd bought it used 3 years earlier and kept it immaculate. He did all the maintenance himself at the shop after hours. His coworkers joked that he loved that car more than he loved Melissa. Tommy would laugh and say, "At least the BMW doesn't give me drama." August 3rd, 2016. Started like any other Wednesday for Tommy Braley. He'd been at Anderson since 7 a.m., working on a transmission rebuild for a regular customer's Chevy Silverado. His co-workers described him as focused but upbeat. He'd made jokes during the morning break, talked about maybe going fishing that weekend at Lake Hartwell if the weather held. Around noon, Tommy's phone buzzed with a text message. Dale Anderson noticed Tommy step outside to take a call, his expression shifting from relaxed to tense. When he came back 15 minutes later, he seemed distracted. Another mechanic, Rob Clemens, asked if everything was okay. "Yeah, just Melissa drama," Tommy had said, waving it off. "You know how it is." Phone records would later show that between noon and 6 p.m., Tommy and Melissa exchanged 47 text messages. The early messages were mundane. Plans to meet up after his shift, what to get for dinner. But around 4 p.m., the tone shifted. Melissa's text became accusatory. She found something on his Facebook. She wrote evidence he'd been talking to other girls. Tommy's responses were defensive, then pleading. He insisted he hadn't done anything wrong. He just wanted to come over and talk it through. The last text Tommy sent was at 6:43 p.m., for minutes before he clocked out. "On my way. Please don't be mad. I love you." Melissa's response came at 6:51 p.m. "Okay." Security footage from Anderson's auto repair showed Tommy walking to his silver BMW at 6:47 p.m. He was wearing his work uniform, gray coveralls with Tommy embroidered over the pocket, and carrying his lunch cooler. He got in the car, sat for a moment looking at his phone, then backed out of the parking space and drove toward the exit. A traffic camera at the intersection of Highway 291 and Monroe Street captured his BMW heading south toward Melissa's apartment at 6:52 p.m. The distinctive silver sedan with its signature kidney grille was clearly visible. It was the last confirmed sighting of Tommy Braley or his beloved car. By midnight, when Tommy hadn't come home or answered his phone, Patricia Braley knew something was wrong. Tommy was responsible about checking in, especially if he was going to be late. She called Melissa's cell. No answer. She called the hospital, thinking maybe there had been an accident. Nothing. At 2 a.m., she drove to Melissa's apartment complex. Tommy's silver BMW wasn't in the parking lot. The lights in Melissa's second-floor apartment were off. Patricia called the police. Riverside Police Department was a small operation. 12 officers, 2 detectives, and a chief who'd held the position for 20 years. Missing person cases weren't common, and when they occurred, they usually resolved quickly. Teenagers running away for a few days. Elderly folks with dementia wandering off. Adults who'd gotten drunk and crashed at a friend's place without calling home. But Detective Sarah Klein, 38, a former Greenville County officer who'd moved to Riverside for a quieter life, sensed this case was different. Tommy wasn't a troubled teen or an impulsive flight risk. He was a responsible adult with strong family ties who disappeared after going to see his girlfriend following a series of tense text messages. Klein's first stop was Melissa Hooper's apartment. The detective arrived at 9 a.m. on August 4th, less than 12 hours after Patricia had reported Tommy missing. Melissa answered the door in pajamas, looking sleepy and confused. She invited Klein in without hesitation, which the detective noted. Innocent people usually cooperated immediately. Guilty people either refused to talk or acted overly helpful to deflect suspicion. The apartment was small, a one-bedroom with minimal furniture and a cluttered kitchen. Nothing seemed out of place. No signs of a struggle. No evidence of Tommy having been there. "When's the last time you saw Tommy?" Klein asked, taking notes. Melissa sat on the couch, pulling her knees to her chest. "Tuesday night. He came over after work. We watched TV, hung out. He left around 10. "Not last night." "No. We were supposed to meet up, but we got into it over text, and I told him I needed space. I figured he just went home." Klein showed her the text exchange the family had provided. Melissa nodded, acknowledging the messages were from her phone. "You said, okay. When he texted, he was on his way. So you were expecting him?" Melissa's expression flickered, just for a second, before smoothing back into confusion. Yeah, but then I changed my mind. I texted him again and said not tonight. He must have just gone somewhere else." But phone records showed no such follow-up text. Melissa was lying about something. But about what? Over the next week, The investigation expanded. Tommy's BMW was entered into the National Crime Information Center database as a missing vehicle. Law enforcement across South Carolina and neighboring states were alerted to watch for the distinctive silver sedan with South Carolina plates. His bank account showed no activity after August 3rd. His credit cards remained unused. His phone went straight to voicemail, either powered off or dead. Volunteers organized searches. Friends, family, and concerned community members combed the woods around Riverside, checked abandoned buildings, and walked every inch of Lake Hartwell shoreline. The searches yielded nothing. Detective Klein interviewed Tommy's friends, family, and coworkers. Everyone said the same thing. Tommy wasn't the type to just disappear. He was reliable, consistent, and close with his family. If he decided to leave town, he would have said something, and he would never have left his BMW behind. Everyone knew how much that car meant to him, unless he couldn't. As the investigation deepened, Melissa Hooper's story began to crack like old paint. Detective Klein pulled Melissa's phone records and found something interesting. On the night of August 3rd, Melissa had made 3 calls to a number registered to a man named Derek Moss. The calls came at 7:14 p.m., 7:29 p.m., and 8:03 p.m. Each call lasted several minutes. When Klein asked Melissa about Derek Moss, her carefully constructed composure faltered. "He's just a friend," she said quickly. "An old friend from Columbia. You called him 3 times the night Tommy disappeared. What were you talking about?" "I don't remember. Just friend stuff. I was upset about the fight with Tommy." But Derek Moss's story, when investigators tracked him down, painted a very different picture. Moss, 34, was a construction worker with a criminal record, drug possession, assault, and a domestic violence charge that had been pleaded down. He admitted to knowing Melissa, but claimed they were more than friends. They'd been involved in an on and off relationship for over a year, overlapping with her relationship with Tommy. "She played us both," Moss told Detective Klein during his interview. "I didn't know about Tommy for months. When I found out, I told her to choose. She kept saying she would, but she never did. She liked having options." The revelation that Melissa had been seeing 2 men simultaneously shifted the investigation's focus. Had Tommy discovered the affair? Had there been a confrontation? And where did Derek Moss fit into Tommy's disappearance? Moss's alibi for August 3rd was solid. He'd been at work on a construction site in Spartanburg, 45 minutes away, until 8 p.m. time cards and co-worker statements confirmed it. He couldn't have been at Melissa's apartment when Tommy arrived. But that didn't mean he wasn't involved. Detective Klein obtained warrants for Melissa's apartment and car. The search of her apartment yielded little, some marijuana, which was noted but not pursued, and Tommy's toothbrush in the bathroom, confirming he'd stayed there recently. Her car, white 2010 Nissan Altima, was more interesting. In the trunk, luminol testing revealed traces of blood that had been cleaned. The pattern suggested someone had wiped down the interior. DNA testing would take weeks, but Klein knew she was onto something. As summer turned to fall, the community's fear intensified. Missing person posters with Tommy's face, that easy smile, those kind eyes, were taped at every storefront window in Riverside. The posters also featured a photo of his silver BMW, hoping someone might have seen the distinctive car. His family held a candlelight vigil on his 29th birthday in September. Patricia Braley appeared on local news, pleading for information. "Someone knows something," Patricia said, her voice breaking. "Tommy didn't just vanish into thin air. Someone out there knows where my son is. If you've seen him or his silver BMW, please call the police. We just want to bring him home." Behind the scenes, the investigation was zeroing in on Melissa Hooper and Derek Moss. The blood in Melissa's trunk came back as a match to Tommy. Confronted with this evidence, Melissa lawyered up and stopped talking to police. Derek Moss, meanwhile, was becoming increasingly nervous. He'd hired his own attorney and refused further interviews. To Detective Klein, their sudden silence screamed guilt. But silence wasn't evidence. And without a body, without a crime scene, without witnesses, the case stalled. Prosecutors were reluctant to bring charges. The circumstantial evidence was suggestive, but not overwhelming. Defense attorneys would argue reasonable doubt all day. Maybe Tommy's blood got in Melissa's trunk during one of his many visits. Maybe they'd transported groceries together after he'd Cut himself. Maybe. The community, frustrated by the lack of arrests, began to splinter. Some people believed Melissa was guilty and should be locked up immediately. Others thought the police were harassing her because they had no other leads. Arguments broke out at town council meetings. Melissa's apartment was vandalized twice. Graffiti calling her a murderer spray-painted on her door. Melissa moved out of Riverside in November, relocating to her mother's house in Columbia. Derek Moss left town too, taking a construction job in North Carolina. To Tommy's family, their departure looked like an admission of guilt. But the investigation continued, and somewhere out there, Tommy's silver BMW remained hidden, a 3,300-pound piece of evidence that could crack the case wide open if only someone could find it. For 6 years, Tommy Braley's case languished in the cold case files. Detective Sarah Klein retired in 2019, haunted by the case she couldn't solve. New detectives reviewed the file periodically but found nothing new. The case seemed destined to remain one of those heartbreaking mysteries that families never get closure on. Then in spring 2022, a development in an unrelated case cracked Tommy Braley's wide open. Derek Moss was arrested in North Carolina on drug trafficking charges, facing substantial prison time. He decided to make a deal. His attorney reached out to prosecutors with an offer. Derek had information about an unsolved homicide in South Carolina. He was willing to talk in exchange for a reduced sentence. Detective James Rutherford, who'd inherited the Braley case, sat down with Derek Moss in an interrogation room in Charlotte on May 12, 2022. What Moss revealed was chilling. "I didn't kill him," Moss said immediately, "but I know what happened, and I know where he is." According to Moss's statement, on the evening of August 3, 2016, Melissa had called him in a panic. Tommy had shown up at her apartment, discovered evidence of Derek's presence, cologne, a jacket Derek had left there, and realized Melissa had been seeing someone else. An argument ensued. Tommy was furious, humiliated. He'd grabbed Melissa's arm, shaking her. Melissa had pushed back, and in the struggle, she'd picked up a heavy glass ashtray from the coffee table and struck Tommy in the head. She said it was an accident, Moss told detectives. Said she just reacted. Didn't mean to hurt him bad. But when he went down and didn't get up, she freaked. Moss claimed he'd rushed to Melissa's apartment after a frantic call and found Tommy unconscious, bleeding from a head wound. They'd checked for a pulse. There wasn't one. Panicked and convinced no one would believe it was an accident, especially given Melissa's affair and their argument. They decided to hide the body. "It was the stupidest decision of my life," Moss said. "But we were scared." Melissa was crying, saying her life was over. "I thought I could fix it." Using Tommy's own BMW, they'd wrapped his body in a tarp from Melissa's apartment and driven to a property Derek had access to, a foreclosed house on the outskirts of Riverside that his construction company was supposed to be renovating. The house had a detached garage with a dirt floor, under cover of darkness. Derek and Melissa had dug a shallow grave in that garage and buried Tommy Braley. They'd disposed of the tarp, cleaned Melissa's apartment and car with bleach, and then faced the problem of the BMW. That car was the biggest issue, Moss admitted. Everybody knew Tommy's silver BMW. It was distinctive, well-maintained. We couldn't just leave it somewhere local. So we drove it to Charlotte, to the long-term parking lot at Charlotte Douglas International Airport. Made it look like he'd left town, started over somewhere. Moss explained they'd wiped down the BMW thoroughly, removing any trace of their presence. They'd parked it in a remote corner of the economy lot, figuring it would sit there for weeks before anyone noticed, long enough for the trail to go completely cold. "The car thing was my idea," Moss admitted. "Made it look like he'd gone somewhere, run away. We thought if there was no body, no car in town, no evidence, it'd just be a missing person thing and eventually people would stop looking." They'd been wrong about that last part. Armed with Derek Moss's statement, investigators descended on the foreclosed property at 1847, County Road 29. The house had been sold twice since 2016 and was now owned by a young couple who'd purchased it as a fixer-upper. They had no idea their garage was a crime scene. On May 18, 2022, forensic teams began carefully excavating the dirt floor of the garage, using ground-penetrating radar. They'd identified an anomaly consistent with disturbed earth in the location Moss had described. 3 feet down, they found the tarp. For feet down, skeletal remains. DNA testing confirmed what everyone already knew. They'd found Tommy Braley. The medical examiner determined cause of death was blunt force trauma to the skull, consistent with being struck by a heavy object. After nearly 6 years buried in the ground, Tommy's remains told the story of his final moments. Meanwhile, investigators in Charlotte confirmed that a silver 2007 BMW 328, matching Tommy's vehicle description and VIN number, had indeed been towed from the airport's long-term parking lot in September 2016 after accumulating parking violations. The car had gone to an impound lot, then eventually to auction when no one claimed it. A used car dealer had purchased it, performed minimal detailing, and sold it to a buyer in Georgia in early 2017. Through DMV records, investigators tracked the current owner, a retiree in Savannah who'd bought the car used in 2019 and had no idea of its history. When investigators seized the BMW and searched it thoroughly, they found that despite Derek and Melissa's cleaning efforts, microscopic blood evidence remained in the trunk carpeting. DNA testing confirmed it was Tommy's blood. The BMW had transported its owner's body to his grave. Patricia Braley received the call she'd been dreading and hoping for simultaneously. Her son had been found. He was dead. There would be no reunion, no miracle. But there would be answers. "I always knew he hadn't just left us," Patricia told reporters through tears. Tommy loved his family. He would never have walked away. And he would never have abandoned his BMW. That car meant everything to him. Now we can bring him home. Now we can lay him to rest. On June 3, 2022, Melissa Hooper was arrested at her mother's home in Columbia and charged with second-degree murder, concealing a death, and obstruction of justice. Derek Moss, as part of his cooperation agreement, pleaded guilty to accessory after the fact and concealing a death. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Melissa maintained her innocence, claiming Derek had killed Tommy in a jealous rage and forced her to help hide the body. But the physical evidence, phone records, and Derek's detailed confession told a different story. At trial in March 2023, prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence. The blood in both Melissa's trunk and Tommy's BMW. The text messages showing the volatile relationship. Testimony from neighbors who'd heard arguing from Melissa's apartment the night Tommy disappeared. Derek Moss's statement, corroborated by the location of Tommy's body, exactly where he said it would be, and the recovery of the BMW, exactly where he said they'd abandoned it. Melissa took the stand in her own defense, tearful and insistent. "It was an accident," she said. "I never meant to hurt him. I love Tommy. He grabbed me. I panicked. I pushed him away. The ashtray was just there. I didn't even realize I'd picked it up." But prosecutors argued that Melissa's actions afterward showed consciousness of guilt, not the behavior of someone who defended herself in a moment of panic. An innocent person calls 911. An innocent person tries to save their boyfriend's life. They don't bury the body in a secret grave, hide the car at an airport, and spend 6 years lying about what happened. Tommy Braley loved two things above all else. Prosecutor Jennifer Walsh told the jury in her closing argument: his family and his BMW. The defendant took both from him. She killed him, buried him like trash, and sent the car he cherished to rot in a parking lot so she could walk free. For 6 years, Tommy's parents drove past that garage, not knowing their son was there. For 6 years, his BMW sat forgotten while his family searched desperately. That's not panic. That's calculation. That's guilt. The jury deliberated for 8 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all counts. Melissa Hooper was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. As the sentence was read, she collapsed, sobbing. Patricia Braley, sitting in the gallery with her daughters, closed her eyes. It wasn't the outcome that brought Tommy back, but it was justice. Riverside in 2023 was not the Riverside of 2016. Tommy Braley's disappearance and the revelation of what had happened to him left scars on the community. The foreclosed house where he'd been buried became a macabre point of interest. The young couple who'd purchased it putting it back on the market immediately. It remained unsold for years. The garage where Tommy lay hidden for so long marked by that invisible stain that no amount of renovation could erase. Anderson's Auto Repair held a memorial service for Tommy. Dale Anderson, now in his 70s, spoke about the young man who'd been like a son to him. "Tommy had a good heart," Dale said, voice thick with emotion. He saw the best in people, sometimes when it wasn't there to see. That goodness cost him his life. But it's also what we'll remember. Not how he died, but how he lived. In the shop's office, Dale kept 2 photos on the wall. One of Tommy smiling in his coveralls, and one of the silver BMW that Tommy had loved so much. He was so proud of that car, Dale told visitors. Kept it perfect. Even now, knowing what happened, I still see that BMW and think of Tommy washing it in the parking lot after work, making it shine. The case became a case study in law enforcement circles about the challenges of prosecuting crimes without bodies and the importance of never giving up on cold cases. Detective James Rutherford, who'd brought the case to closure, spoke at conferences about persistence and the value of building relationships with cooperating witnesses. Derek Moss carrying that guilt for 6 years ate at him, Rutherford explained. When he got arrested on the drug charges, it gave him an out, a way to unburden himself while also helping himself. That's often how these cases break. Someone's conscience catches up with them, or circumstances change and talking becomes more appealing than staying silent. For Tommy's family, the years of wondering were over, replaced by the hard work of grief. Patricia and Jean Braley established the Tommy Braley Memorial Scholarship at Riverside High School, awarded annually to a student pursuing automotive technology. Tommy's sisters, Kelsey and Amanda, became advocates for missing persons families, volunteering with organizations that helped other families navigate the nightmare they'd lived through. You never stop hoping, Amanda said in an interview. Even when logic tells you the worst has happened, there's this voice in your head saying maybe they're still out there. Getting the call that Tommy had been found, knowing for certain he was gone, it was devastating. But it was also relief. The not knowing is its own special torture. At least now we know. At least now we can move forward. The story of Tommy's silver BMW became almost as haunting as Tommy's disappearance itself. After being recovered from the Savannah owner, the car became evidence, sitting in a police impound lot for months during the trial. The car that Tommy had kept pristine, that he'd maintained with such care, had passed through multiple hands, each owner unaware they were driving a vehicle that had transported a murder victim. The used car dealer who'd originally purchased it from the Charlotte impound auction was devastated when he learned the truth. I detailed that car myself, he told reporters. Never found anything suspicious. They'd cleaned it well. If I'd known if there'd been any sign. The Georgia buyer who'd owned it from 2017 to 2019 sold it immediately upon learning its history, taking a financial loss just to be rid of it. My kids rode in that car, she said, shaken. We took family road trips, and all that time we were driving the car of a murdered man. The Savannah retiree, the final owner before police seized it, struggled with the knowledge. I loved that BMW, he said. It drove beautifully, never gave me problems. But knowing what happened, knowing Tommy died and his body was in that trunk, I can't look at it the same way. After the trial concluded, the BMW was released from evidence. Patricia Braley had the option to claim it, but she couldn't bear to. That car represents everything Tommy loved about his work, his passion for mechanics, she said. But it also represents how he died, how they used something he cherished to hide his murder. I want to remember Tommy working on engines, not this. The BMW was sold at auction, the proceeds going to the Tommy Braley Memorial Scholarship Fund. The buyer was a car restoration enthusiast who knew the full history. Someone should care for it the way Tommy did, he said. It's not the car's fault what happened. Tommy would want it to be driven, maintained, appreciated. He restored the BMW to perfect condition and drives it regularly, always with a small memorial decal on the rear window. In memory of Tommy Braley, 1988 to 2016. It's become a rolling memorial, a silver ghost that reminds Riverside of a young man who loved cars and died too young. Law enforcement agencies across South Carolina and neighboring states studied the Tommy Braley case, extracting lessons about missing person investigations and the importance of early forensic work. Detective Rutherford identified several key factors that had allowed Melissa and Derek to hide Tommy for so long. The cleaned crime scene. Without blood spatter evidence at Melissa's apartment, investigators couldn't prove Tommy had died there. The disposal of the car, abandoning the BMW at Charlotte's airport, created a false trail and delayed the search, making it appear Tommy had voluntarily left the lack of witnesses. Because Tommy and Melissa's Fight happened inside her apartment. No one saw him arrive or saw anything suspicious. The choice of burial location, using a foreclosed property that would change hands multiple times, was clever, ensuring that even if someone discovered the grave, it wouldn't immediately point back to them. The distinctive vehicle. Ironically, the fact that Tommy's BMW was so well-known worked against the investigation initially. When it disappeared along with Tommy, it supported the theory he'd left voluntarily. No one suspected the killers would be bold enough to drive it to another state. They almost got away with it, Rutherford admitted. If Derek hadn't been arrested on unrelated charges and decided to deal, Tommy might still be in that garage. The new owners could have poured a concrete floor, built over it, never knowing. And the BMW could have circulated forever, its history unknown. It was Derek's conscience or his self-interest, maybe both, that finally brought Tommy home. The case also highlighted relationship red flags that Tommy's friends and family had seen but not acted on strongly enough. Melissa's isolation of Tommy from his family, her secrecy about her life, the on-again, off-again nature of their relationship, the way she manipulated him emotionally. Domestic violence advocates use Tommy's case to illustrate that abuse and dangerous relationships aren't always obvious. Sometimes they present as drama, as passion, as a complicated but ultimately romantic story. Tommy's friends had joked about the Melissa drama. They'd rolled their eyes at the breakups and makeups. No one had recognized the danger until it was too late. 7 years. That's how long Tommy Braley was missing. 2000. 557 days of not knowing, of hoping, of dread. Holidays without him. Birthdays uncelebrated. His prized BMW missing along with him. Both man and machine vanished as if they'd never existed. Patricia Braley described those 7 years as living in purgatory. You can't move forward because you're always waiting for news, she explained. But you can't go back either. You're just stuck. Every time the phone rings, your heart stops. Every time you see a silver BMW, you look. You never stop looking. Jean Braley, who'd helped Tommy buy that BMW, who taught him to change his first oil filter, took the loss especially hard. That car is supposed to be his future, Jean said. He was saving up, planning to eventually trade up to a newer model. But he took such good care of it. I keep thinking about him in that parking lot after work, washing it, making it shine. He was so proud. The resolution when it came was both relief and agony. Relief to finally know, agony to have those last desperate hopes extinguished. Tommy wasn't going to walk through the door. He wasn't going to call from somewhere saying he'd needed space and lost track of time. He'd been dead since that August evening in 2016, his body cold and buried while his family searched desperately, holding candlelight vigils, posting flyers, never giving up. They held a funeral on June 15th, 2022. Nearly 7 years after Tommy's death. The service was held at First Baptist Church, the same church where Tommy had been baptized as a child. The sanctuary overflowed with mourners, not just family and friends, but community members who'd searched for Tommy, who'd kept his missing person poster in their shop windows, who'd never stopped hoping. At the service, Dale Anderson spoke about Tommy's love for his work and for his BMW. He used to say that car was his meditation, Dale recalled. After a hard day, he'd go for a drive, clear his head. The road and the engine. That's where Tommy found peace. I hope wherever he is now, he's at peace too. Tommy was buried in Riverside Memorial Cemetery, his headstone reading, Tommy Lee Braley, 1988 to 2016. Beloved son, brother, friend. Forever in our hearts. Now at peace. At the gravesite, Patricia placed a small toy BMW next to the flowers, a symbol of the car Tommy had loved and the freedom it had represented to him. As of 2025, Patricia and Jean Braley still live in the house on Oakwood Drive. Tommy's room has been slowly transformed, his belongings distributed with care. His tools went to Anderson's Auto Repair, where young mechanics use them and hear Tommy's story. His automotive textbooks went to the scholarship fund, given to students pursuing the career Tommy loved. Tommy's sisters have both married and started families. Kelsey named her son Thomas, after her brother. Amanda has a daughter named Patricia Suzanne. Patricia, after her mother. Suzanne as a middle name that echoes Tommy's story of loss and love. The family gathers at Tommy's grave on his birthday every year. They bring flowers and always a photo of that silver BMW. He loved that car so much, Patricia says. It's fitting that it helped solve his case, that it told his story even when he couldn't. Melissa Hooper will be eligible for parole in 2047, when she's 56 years old. The Braley family has already indicated they will oppose her release at every hearing. She took 28 years from Tommy, Amanda said, and she used the thing he loved most, his car, to help hide his murder. She should serve every day of her sentence. Derek Moss's earliest parole date is 2032. Whether he'll be released then depends on many factors, but his cooperation and behavior in prison may work in his favor. The Braley family's feelings about Moss are complicated. Anger at his participation in hiding Tommy, grudging acknowledgement that his confession finally brought their brother home and helped recover the BMW. Anderson's Auto Repair, now run by Dale Anderson's son, keeps a shrine to Tommy in the office. The photos of Tommy and his beloved BMW hang side by side, along with the VIN plate that was removed from the car before it was sold at auction. Patricia couldn't bear to own the car, but she wanted that one piece, that connection to what Tommy had loved. Tommy Braley's story is a tragedy without redemption, a life cut short by violence and hidden by deception. But it's also a story about persistence, about a family that refused to let their son be forgotten, about investigators who never stopped looking for answers. For 7 years, Tommy was missing but not gone. He existed in photographs and memories, in the hole his absence left in countless lives. His silver BMW, traveling unknown roads with unknown drivers, carried a story even when no one knew it. His disappearance changed Riverside, made people more cautious, more aware that terrible things could happen even in small towns where everybody knew everyone. But Tommy's legacy is more than the circumstances of his death. It's in the scholarship that bears his name, helping young people pursue the career he loved. It's in the missing person advocacy his sisters now do, helping other families navigate the nightmare they survived. It's in the lessons law enforcement learned about persistence and forensics and never giving up on cold cases. Most of all, Tommy's legacy lives in the people who loved him and refused to let him be defined by how he died. He was a son, a brother, a friend, a talented mechanic with grease under his fingernails and a passion for cars that was pure and true. He deserved better than what happened to him, but he got justice. And after 7 years of questions, his family got answers. It's not enough. It will never be enough. But in a world where so many disappearances remain unsolved, where so many families never learn the truth, it's something. Tommy Braley is no longer missing. His silver BMW story is known. He's home. If you or someone you love is in a relationship that feels dangerous or controlling, please reach out for help. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is available 24/7 at 1-800-799-7233. Thank you for watching and for keeping Tommy's memory alive. Subscribe for more stories that matter. And remember to tell the people you love how much they mean to you. Tomorrow is never guaranteed. Stay safe.